what could I do that could create a little bit of intrigue and interest, but help, start the mission. Because I think there are pages in there that talk about like what is cannabis, like what are psychedelics, what is the state of play in the UK, what is the state of play in the US. So I wanted to give people a starting point in which to jump off from.
Hi, Low No Nation, and welcome to this week's conversation on the Low No Drinker podcast. Today, I'm in conversation with Mr. Daniel Rowntree. We were just chatting before I pressed record. We are like digital social media ships that pass in the night. We've both been aware of each other's content for a while, and I've been looking forward to speaking to Daniel because he has a lot of knowledge in an area that I know very, very little about. So hopefully it'll be helpful to you as well. Daniel is a man that wears many hats. He is a co-founder of Brew LDN. He's the founder of a startup company, a beer company called Big Hug Brewing. He's a fractional CMO of a biotech company. And he's also, and this is what he talks a lot about on his LinkedIn, a founder coach. And I quote, helping founders fall in love with their mission, which obviously I really appreciate. On top of all that, he's also the mind behind High and Dry, an agency on a mission to educate and inspire a generation of decision makers, innovators, investors, business owners, and curious consumers about the dry economy and what comes next. And that is largely what we're here to talk about today. Daniel's commissioned a fascinating report with CAM about the dry economy. The high and dry economy, and I really want to dive into these ingredients that are really becoming more prominent in our drinking sphere at the moment, but are still, particularly in the UK, not very well understood. So, as you can tell, this is Daniel's forte, so I'm going to stop talking now and say, hello, Daniel. Thank you for joining me. How are you today, my lovely?
I'm awesome. What an amazing intro. You really have done your research. You've literally just pitched my whole life. So that's awesome. Or my LinkedIn profile. And you've just done a great job of like regaling my mission for High and Dry, which is great. So thanks for that.
Well, they're your fantastic words, my dear. I'm just reading them back out to you. But you've got some amazing mission statements. I do genuinely love your positioning, as I was saying to you before. You seem to be coming from a place of genuinely just wanting to help as many people as you can reach, and that's so admirable from where I'm standing.
Oh, thank you very much. And just to be clear, I am no expert. I'm just one of those curious consumers, probably a little bit further on than the curious consumers I'm trying to influence. And we've got a long way to go for sure. And it was always for me about trying to bridge the gap between where we are today in the UK and what could potentially come next
Yeah.
as we look to other nations and other markets that have opened up. Kind of other mood altering substances.
And I mean, I usually ask my people, and I said I'd start by asking you to tell your story, but actually you've hit on a point there which is worth addressing, because there is a big difference, isn't there, between what we see and understand here in the UK when it comes to sort of functional ingredients, and I use that as an umbrella term, which you can dive into, and other places. The States mainly is where I hear a lot about it from, but also places closer to home who are far more open to these different types of ingredients.
Yeah, look, I mean, I spent a couple of years going back and forth to Los Angeles. I actually lived in Los Angeles for just under a year, and it was amazing. I made the choice not to drink at the beginning of 2022, and part of that journey, I was, I guess, exposed to legalized cannabis markets in Los Angeles and in New York, and I was sort of, my mind was opened because I'm sort of reappraising, I guess, THC, weed, whatever you want to call it, again, having, decided it wasn't for me during university, going, hang on a minute, this market is legal, it's regulated, and it's being served in forms that I now find familiar, like gummies, like chocolates, like drinks, like these very sophisticated FMCG, CPG brands. So look, I was like, okay, well, there is a potential other way. And I I guess I indulged while I was there, and I found it beneficial to me, both from a kind of like moderating my mood, but also there are kind of real health wellness benefits for cannabis in all its forms, CBD and THC and full spectrum. So, it started to get me thinking, hang on a minute, is there a bridge here, like between, kind of like full on what I'd call drinking culture in the UK, what I've been used to a whole career in it, and a vision of the future where you've got other mood altering substances, and you've got this kind of, I guess, epicenter of it all in America, Los Angeles, where all these kind of burgeoning cultures are happening, and there's a movement there that's saying, okay, well, look, I want to abstain from drinking and other addictive substances, and I want to lean into psychedelics, adaptogens, nootropics, and THC as part of a wellness movement, and that's called Cali Sober. Like it's a kind of a recognized movement or way of living out there, and I was like, that's for me. That's speaking to me at this time in my life, and when I came back to the UK, I was like, hang on a minute, we've got nothing of that ilk here, and I was just I guess a confused booze consumer, a real kind of like I'm all in. I went all in on booze, and now that's not part of my life anymore. So what do I associate with? So there's this kind of wellness movement that I believe is the thing that's really driving my passion behind High and Dry.
Amazing. I mean, there's so much there already to unpack, and a lot of different directions that we can go in. The movement over there is definitely where I think it's leading from. That's where I first heard the term Cali Sober, and it's interesting because quite often in life in general, what they do in the States, we eventually end up doing over here. So you could say it's pretty much inevitable that it was going to be making its way here. But of course, a lot of these drinks can't get to us because of certain ingredients aren't allowed. I was just editing the podcast I did with Chris and Chrissy from the World Alcohol Free Awards, and they were saying that, they had a couple of drinks that they couldn't judge because they couldn't get them imported into the UK. So I guess one of the first questions I want to put to you is, where is the legality in all of this for us here in the UK? Now, I do have a lot of people who listen to the podcast who are in the States. I'm guessing they'll have a bit of a better understanding already for their side. But for us in the UK, when we're talking about CBD drinks, when we're talking about things like THC, when we're talking about microdosing, I guess it can all sound a little bit illicit if you don't know what it is. So, are we doing something naughty if we start going down and exploring this rabbit hole?
Look, it is really complicated. I'm not going to lie, and there's, even in America, state by state, it's different. Yeah. And, we could have a whole podcast on the nuances of what's going on in the States. But I ask this question quite a lot in the UK, and it's like, so Denise, is cannabis legal in the UK?
Yes. Because you can get it medically, can't you? You can't just walk down the street and get it off John off the street corner, but you can have it prescribed to you under certain circumstances, is my understanding. Have I just made a fool of myself?
No, absolutely not. That's good. So, I mean, like I always say, look, again, that's complicated. There are the molecules within cannabis are called cannabinoids, and the one that we know there's available in the UK is called CBD, and the psychoactive one is THC. THC is not legal in the UK. CBD is legal in the UK within certain kind of amounts. Again, arbitrary in my opinion, but I think it's important that the FSA has some kind of legislation around it, but it's still quite arbitrary. And to your point, full spectrum cannabis is medicinally legal, and we have, I believe, 30,000 medicinal cannabis patients in the UK, but we have 1.5 million people using it for medicinal purposes. So it shows you that the current system for forgetting,
Mm-hmm.
medicinal cannabis to the people that need it is not working.
So those 30,000 people who are getting it prescribed, presumably, on the NHS, and then the others are getting it from the street corner. Is that the likelihood?
That's the likelihood, and again, this is quite anecdotal, and it's based on research. But and also, I could be wrong about this. I don't think it's NHS. You have to pay for a private prescription. My father-in-law went through the process. My dad's going through the process. Both have fibromyalgia. I think I've said that right, or polymyalgia rheumatica. But and so do qualify. It's not an easy process to do, and it's quite expensive. So you have to pay for the consultation, and you have to pay for the ongoing medicine.
It's funny, isn't it? Because even the research you see, the proper research papers that you'll see in the medical journals and the NIH will say that there are positive medicinal benefits to this compound without the psychoactive substance in it. So it begs the question why it's not more widely available.
Yeah, look, I mean, it is a question. I think before long, common sense has got to prevail, like it has in other markets. I think we can look to the States as a kind of model, but I think because they've had their state by state kind of legislation, and it's opened up at different rates. And if you look at when states have gone from medicinally legal to recreationally legal, I think that's a really nice stat to look at, and you can average those out. And I think it first went medicinally legal in California in like 1970s, and it was like 20 years before it went recreationally legal. But there are certain markets recently have just gone from medicinally legal to recreationally legal within a year. And the interesting stat, I think, is that in Germany, for example, which is probably a market closer to home, and probably one that our government is going to be looking at as a bit of a case study rather than what's going on in the States, is that they went medicinally legal in 2017, and they went recreationally legal, albeit with kind of some tight restrictions, in May this year. And we went medicinally legal in 2018. So if you use the same time frame, we would be going recreationally legal next year. Now that's not happening. Keir Starmer's not mentioned it. It's not part of anyone's kind of plan. But my kind of bullish prediction is that by 2030, it's probably 2032, something like that, we will have a recreational cannabis market in the UK.
Interesting, and it does seem that things are moving in that direction, and one thing, the power of the people is strong, and if people are wanting these things and they are finding ways to get hold of them that may not be the best way to do it, and there is medical and scientific proof of the benefits, then it's only a matter of logic, I suppose, until these changes are made.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because I mean we have focused in on cannabis, which is probably the most logical step. But when we talk about adaptogens and nootropics, adaptogens are essentially compounds that affect your body and your body's ability to deal with stress, and nootropics are again compounds that deal with cognitive function. So caffeine, for example, is a nootropic, and again, in the UK, we have real tight kind of legislation, things like Kava and Kratom and Amanita muscaria, which are kind of more like a core psychoactive, nootropics, I guess. They're also legislated against in this country, where in America, for example, they're a little bit more open. So, and then we talk about psychedelics and and other compounds, including ketamine and MDMA. I'm not saying that that's going to seep into FMCG anytime soon, but for me, it's part of the same conversation as part of a health and wellness routine. There are certain states in America that, MDMA is not legal in any way in the States. That was going to happen in 2024. It didn't get passed, but ketamine, for example, for treatment resistant depression can be prescribed. Johnson & Johnson have a nasal inhaler called I think they I think there was $1 billion worth of sales last year on this one ketamine. It's not actually ketamine; it's a derivative of, that they can own, but it does the same thing. So it's, these things are being reappraised, rightly so, for the good that they can do. And while unfortunately for alcohol there is no therapeutic use, there's no benefit to anyone other than obviously anecdotal social benefits, etc. There are documented benefits of all of these currently illegal compounds, substances, drugs, whatever you want to call them.
Wow, I'm shocked to hear that about the ketamine spray. That's not something I ever thought I would have heard has been used in any way. But I suppose it comes from the fact that all of these drugs that we take recreationally were initially medicinal, and then they've just been abused. So you're right. We've focused a lot in on that area. Let's take it to something that's going to really resonate with Low No Nation, and that is the inclusion of ingredients into the drinks that we're using now, because low and no, as we know, as a category, is just taking off. Okay, so we know that that's soaring, and then within that we have the subcategories of different types of drinks, whether you're looking at your wines or your proxies or your beers and whatnot. And then you've got your adaptogenic drinks, your functional beverages, your nootropic beverages, and it seems to me like there are more and more and more new functional drinks coming out on an almost weekly basis. For those of you watching the video on YouTube, I've put behind me a few of the ones that I had around the house, and they've got all sorts of ingredients in them. There are some that seem to crop up in all of them, like lion's mane, and then there are others that lend themselves more towards a term that I learned in your report, which was the psychotropic-curious. So how are these ingredients making their way into our drinks, and how is that impacting low-no drinks?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's great to see. I think we're in a second phase of moderation. The first phase was all about mimicking the taste of alcohol. Now it's about mimicking the whole experience of alcohol, depth of flavour, complexity, mouthfeel, and of course mood. And the amazing entrepreneurs and businesses out there are looking for compounds that can mimic what we're used to in alcohol in many ways, but it's difficult to kind of make a direct comparison, and also the efficacy is unvalidated in many ways. There's lots of peer-reviewed studies about individual compounds and how they react to your body, but how much and what the quality is, it is a little bit of the wild west, and I do believe a lot of it is anecdotal, and I think that's okay. If people believe that CBD is having a calming effect on them, that's absolutely fine. If L-theanine is really kind of relaxing them, then that's all right, and I really applaud some of the entrepreneurs and businesses that are out there at the moment really championing this. And there's a couple that I buy quite a lot, like Impossible Brew, for example. They have this blend that they call it, about 3 adaptogens and nootropics. I think it's called the Social Blend, which again, for me, I'm not sure if I get an initial hit of anything, but I think over the course of 2 or 3, I definitely feel something, and I think it doesn't replace that kind of one drink buzz that you get from alcohol. But I'm not chasing that anymore. But it's definitely something in addition to just mimicking the taste of alcohol. And you've got to think, when you've got a generation, and I know everyone talks about Gen Z kind of championing the kind of non-alc movement. I'm not sure I agree with that. But, the reality is that there's a lot of people that haven't trained themselves to drink alcohol. So you've got a whole generation of people that haven't trained themselves how to drink alcohol. Why would they want an alcohol replacement? But they might want to still alter their mood, and they might still want the kind of experience of alcohol. So the packaging, the mouthfeel, the complexity, etc. So I think adaptogens and nootropics and any other psychoactive ingredient just adds to this whole kind of moderation movement.
So how, and this might be a really difficult question to answer, but
Mhm.
how mood altering are these drinks? So if you're on video, you can see behind me, I've got
Yeah.
things, from Zoos is a new one. We've got some Trip, Smiling Wolf. These are all brands that use functional ingredients, everything from sort of lion's mane to, and interestingly enough as well, you mentioned Impossible Brew. A lot of these brands I've noticed they're keeping their ingredients list sort of proprietary, and they're patented and everything. So how mood in enhancing or altering will these drinks be? And I ask from the perspective of, no, I know that they won't make you feel drunk, but would they relax you to the point that you might think, oh, go on, then I'll just have a shot? Or is it just a far more
Oh,
sedate sort of feeling?
it's really difficult to pinpoint because
Yeah.
I think it's very subjective to the individual.
Okay.
I mean, I can give you an experience I had with three spirits, the Livener. I had it for the first time with my wife probably 3 years ago,
Hmm.
2.5 years ago, and there was no kind of like one part of the night where I thought that my mood had massively increased, but we talked for probably, well, we normally go to bed early. We're up until midnight talking, in a very kind of like convivial manner. So like, and but then I've had other instances where that hasn't happened. So
Yeah.
I think it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint a mood. And in fact, I worked for a venture fund for a couple of years, and we did a study, and again it was we asked Gen Z consumers to take. I think we used three different brands, and to kind of document their mood pre and post, and use it in different situations on their own um, with groups of people,
Hmm.
and again, really wild, differing views.
Okay.
So I think it's yet to be validated. And I
Okay.
think, for example, we mentioned Impossible Brew, they do a lot of their own research. So they ask their consumers, that's really good CRM system. They ask their consumers to kind of rate their experience on scales of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. I can't remember now. And it's,
Hmm.
so they're collecting data all of the time, So, and then Centura, which is another one, which is backed by Professor Dr. Nutt. Again, there's a little bit of science behind that. So, talking about GABA receptors, etc. So, I think it's not good enough just to say, oh, we got some L-theanine in it, so therefore you're going to chill out with it. I think it's about how much, and then the frequency in which the person takes it, and because if you really want to get granular with it, lion's mane doesn't really take effect until like taking it once a day, every day for 3 to 4 weeks. So is it going to really have that effect? But who knows what it has when it's combined with those other things, what it actually does. But I think in direct answer to your question, you've got no danger of feeling I guess anyway unable to kind of handle heavy machinery.
Yeah, yeah, no risk of lack of control.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it sounds to me like it's still very much like a lot of our industry, but this sector particularly is very much in its infancy, and there's a lot of research that needs to continue to take place. I mean, to put everyone's mind at ease, all the ingredients used in the drink will be food safe. These are products produced for human consumption, so they are completely safe to consume. But exactly how they're going to work, I guess, brings me to my second observation, which is that it can be a little bit like alcohol in the sense that it affects different bodies in different ways at different times.
Correct.
If you're my husband's 6'4" and goes to the gym all the time, so things don't affect him the way that they affect me because I do not go to the gym all the time. And if you've got somebody who's very slight and very petite, they might be biologically more impacted by something. And also the frequency, as you mentioned, with which you're taking something, and I suppose it's true, right? Because you look at any supplement, for example, and a lot of these ingredients are akin to supplements that you might get at Holland and Barrett or something. It's not take this one time and your skin will clear up, or
Yeah,
take this one morning and your cognitive function will be improved. It's
yeah,
take one of these every day with a meal until you start to see the benefits.
yeah.
Mm.
So,
It's fascinating.
and I think it's also the quality of like any kind of like when we get really deep into any product which is of a premium nature, understanding where the kind of raw materials come from, how they're harvested, and the kind of the amount of the psychoactive, because even within lion's mane there are bits of the lion's mane, like the fruiting body, and I can't remember exactly, I think they're lipo somethings, they're the actual things that kind of create I think they either block or kind of inhibit serotonin receptors. I can't remember which. You see, I'm curious, I'm not an expert.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You're psychotropic-curious,
This is
which,
it.
which is a
Yeah.
great term. You mentioned Professor David Nutt, and obviously he's one of the leaders of this sort of subcategory, isn't he, with his Sentia? And he's just brought out, or they've just brought out, a third SKU, which is their Sentia Gold. But interestingly, that their positioning has always been that it is designed to replicate that 2-drink feeling, because they have, through their research, they've identified that that's the sweet spot for when you're out with your friends, when you're on drink number 2 and you're happy and you're merry, and it's just before you start making bad choices. Which I'm fascinated to know, to have been part of that research lab and how they came to that conclusion. But that's that whole GABA receptor
Yeah.
piece that seems to be the thing that everybody sort of grabs hold of and is like, let's replicate that 2-drink feeling, which I suppose, if you're choosing not to drink for no other reason than perhaps your health, or you just don't like it anymore, or as you and I were both saying before, it just doesn't serve us anymore, then there's absolutely no concern there. And if you're somebody who feels that their relationship with alcohol is damaging in any way, shape, or form, then I guess my duty of care to anyone listening would be to always, if you're taking something to rectify that kind of situation, is to seek advice beforehand. Just as you would if you were taking supplements, you go and speak to your doctor beforehand, or somebody, a professional who knows more about them, to make sure that you are doing the best thing for yourself.
Absolutely, and as you quite rightly alluded to, everyone is different, and unfortunately, alcohol in the wrong hands, can be deadly.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take it back a little bit.
Mhm.
You speaking about your lovely evening with your wife reminded me that I did say to you that we would start off the chat normally by talking about your origin story, as it were. But as I knew would happen when I spoke to you, there'd be so many different tangents that we could go in. But take me back to where you are comfortable starting. How, because you've had such a varied career and worn many hats, how have you got to the point where you're now opening High and Dry and using that to really positively influence the future of our industry?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So yeah, I guess I have had a, not a guess, I have had a 2-decade career in the booze industry. Started back in 2004, 2003, 2004, working for Bacardi. Did a couple of years there, and then went on a Being Bacardi course and realised that I didn't want to be part of a corporate structure. And I think I was driving away from Southampton in my Audi A4, feeling a bit like Alan Partridge, going, "This isn't for me." So I was currently at that point I was working on Grey Goose, and I awarded my then not created agency a job as as the kind of below the line agency for a small project, and that was me off. And then I went on my own founder-led journey with an agency and a co-founder for 13 years, and we had a great time. Growing a team from the 2 of us to 45 people, and we only worked with booze brands. So we had a 7-year relationship with ABI. We worked with Diageo. We worked with Pernod Ricard, with Carlsberg, with Heineken, with anyone within the booze industry of any merit at the time. We were specialists in on trade activation, and we did experience and any kind of consumer touch point around that. And then we sold that business to Matthew Clark in 2017, and then went on a journey of integrating into their business, and so got to know all the wholesale side of things. And then they got acquired, and there was some messy business there between Conviviality and CNC. So I ended up, being owned by a family-owned company, then and as an AIM listed market company, and then a London stock market owned company in terms of CNC. But also during that time, I set up, Craft Beer Rising, which has morphed into Brew London. I was founding partner of Brew Broker, and I went all in on booze, Denise. I did everything, and even in 2010, me and my ex-wife, we took on a punch lease, the Old Nun's Head in Nunhead near Peckham. Mm-hmm. And we had that pub for 5 years. And my daughter was actually born in that pub in 2010, upstairs, 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon.
Wow.
So we had to turn the music up. So it was. So I went all in on booze. And after Elastic, which was my agency's name, mm-hmm. helped set up a venture fund with someone I'd known in the booze industry for a long time, Dan Gasper. We went out to the States, raised some family office money, invested in the Drinks of the Future, and then something happened in 2022. I decided to stop drinking, and as we alluded to, there's two main reasons for that. And the main one is that it stopped serving me, and I'm just a far better human without it, if I'm honest. But that's a personal choice. Mm-hmm. The second reason is I lived for a decade with my ex-wife, who was an alcoholic, and unfortunately she passed away at the end of 2022 from decompensated liver disease and cirrhosis. So, I have in one hand, I've got a very positive relationship with alcohol, because it's given me so much, but on the other hand, it's also, taken my daughter's mother, so it's really important for me. And I don't say that to shock. It's just part of my story. Yeah. And, and I think I now find myself in this position to do something for the good of the industry. I would be naive to just go like all drinking is bad, because we've got a societal change to come through. And I guess we touched upon my time in America, and kind of my exposure to what was going on out there. And when my time came to an end in America, I was like, well, how can I take what I know, or what I've seen in the States, and kind of add that to my experience in the booze industry, and trying to create a positive change, and come back to the UK and try and create a message that is more positive. And I guess that led me to create High and Dry, which is an agency. It's not my first rodeo with an agency, and collaboration studio. So let me explain a little bit about that, because, I think it's a long game, right? There's going to be a while before we've got, psychedelics, widely available, and cannabis widely available. But I'm really keen on taking consumers on a journey from where we are now to where we might be, mm-hmm. to try and change some of the stereotypes wrapped up around cannabis and psychedelics, etc. And I initially want to work with businesses that want to prepare themselves for that inevitable change. Okay. And then the collaboration studio piece is me working with innovators, businesses, to create products, to create things that fit into this space. So, I've come back with a view that I needed to create some relevance and some leverage in the market, and that's why I did the report with Cam, with some great friends, Katie Moses, Katie Jenkins, and Blake. Great team, love them, and so they really helped me, put that out there and gave me a little bit of a platform. And I guess now is the next stage of that. I really want to work with businesses to try and change the landscape, which will ultimately lead to consumer behavior change.
And when you say work with businesses, is that a broad spectrum of businesses, or are you focusing on a specific niche?
Not really. No, I'm selling foresights. So foresights are kind of visions of the future. So like how can we take a read about what's going to be happening 5 years down the line, and how can I then take that you know that foresight and bring it into today's business
Hmm.
and help them prepare better for the future.
Okay. And in your sort of vast experience and with what you're doing now, I suppose that naturally leads me to ask you about sort of big alcohol, because you've obviously got a lot of experience working with some of these major brands, and some of them are moving now into the low-no space to mixed reception, shall we say, from some of the industry. Um, None of them I've seen that I'm aware of, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, into the more functional side of things. Do you think that that's a move that we might see from some of the larger producers that you were talking of, your Diageos, your AB and Bevs, or is it just a step too far for them at the moment?
So it's a really good question. I mean, there's always this kind of a big out kind of like independent debate. And,
Yeah.
I always look at it, it's like they're part of the ecosystem. We really need them. They provide growth capital. They provide, the exits, ultimately running a non-booze or a booze business, it's not very economical unless you've got a portfolio. So you can only get it so far on your own.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Look, I don't. It's an easy win for Big Alc to go, well, hey, here's Gordon's and here's Captain Morgan's. Let's just stick a zero on it and roll with it. That's easy because consumers get it. So yeah, look, I think of course they're looking at it. If you look at my report, that most of the big booze businesses have a play or an investment or a joint venture in cannabis somewhere.
Okay.
So and I know for a fact that that there are moves as well in the functional space. In terms of some initial growth capital investments from some big alc businesses. So look, it's inevitable, but I think like many people, they just don't quite know how big it's going to be, and they don't quite know if the legislation is going to change or when it's going to change. And I think people, some of the businesses have made plays already. For example, in the States, Lagunitas, which is a Heineken-owned brewery, have a THC seltzer. Pabst Blue Ribbon, for example, have a THC seltzer. So and I know Lagunitas isn't. Yeah, yes, it is Heineken owned, but they do operate under their own kind of jurisdiction in the States. So again, I think they're looking for as much feedback and data as they possibly can in order to make the most kind of calculated moves. Because really, what we've got here, like on a macro level, is people drinking less, but they're still wanting some of the experiences that
Yeah.
booze was creating. So it's inevitable, I think, that this is going to now come on the agendas of M&A for the next for the foreseeable, I believe.
I've got your report. If you see me looking off to the side, I'm just opening up your report as we're speaking. I'm very grateful to have had a chance to have a look through it, because there are some huge sort of brand names that you've got in there who have got investment in some way, shape, or form in some sort of functional business, or a lot seem to be involved in sort of research, which suggests that there is going to be quite an upsurge in a few years of things coming our way. The report is absolutely fascinating. It's very thorough. It's what inspired you to put it together, because this isn't just like a quick bit of homework that you had to turn in.
No, thank you. It was, what could I do that could, you know, create a little bit of intrigue and interest, but help, start the mission, because I think, there are pages in there that talk about, like, what is cannabis? Like, what are psychedelics? What is the state of play in the UK? What is the state of play in the US? So I wanted to give people a starting point in which to jump off from. And off the back of this, I have a newsletter which I publish once a month. Again, I'm just starting to drip feed certain bits of information. More often than not, it's when I find it out and I think it's interesting, then I'll pass it down. But yeah, that was the main reason, really, was to try and create a little bit of relevance and leverage, to say, look, I'm putting my hand up to say, look, this might be a long game, but I'm here for the long game.
Yeah.
I think that, this is going to be part of the future, and I want to help in any way I can. So this was the first kind of like step in that direction, really.
Absolutely, I can see exactly where you're coming from, and it does cover the state of the nation, as you put it in there, in the UK, the US. You're looking at Germany. It looks at motivations and occasions where people are using or exploring a psychotropic-curious lifestyle. Obviously, some stats about alcohol being on the decline, but people still looking for, as you say, those things that they can use to help recreate some of what they miss from their drinking experiences without the extra side effects that nobody misses when they choose to live a life less intoxicated. If people want to get hold of the report, where can they go and find a copy, please, Daniel?
Yes, on my website, which is www.highanddry.live.
Okay, fantastic. And I highly recommend it. It's well worth a read. It was very enlightening, not to give away too much, but there's a bit about market overview where you talk about the global markets for cannabis, for psychedelics, for CBD, for functional mushrooms. And just to put that one out there, it's a 24.4 billion pound market for functional mushrooms. That's just staggering. They're mushrooms. I was going for a walk this just now in the park. They're growing out the trees.
Mushrooms is a whole other topic for sure. But I do genuinely believe that the functional mushrooms that are starting to come into the consciousness of consumers now really do help. I take lion's mane every morning. I do believe it helps with cognitive function, and that's not a placebo. I think it genuinely does help. And we also surveyed over 1,000 people in the UK and in the US. So this is showing genuine consumer behaviours, and also the desire for a change to happen in the UK specifically, and also it also alludes to what happens to consumers, specifically in the States, because obviously it's legalized over there, when other mood altering substances are introduced. What happens to their alcohol consumption habits, which are really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well worth a read, guys. I will link to that below. And when they go to your website, would they also be able to sign up for your newsletter there as well?
That's also on there as well, yeah. And if there's, it's probably worth mentioning that, the next step for me, if there are any businesses out there that are interested or intrigued, is, we will come in and do a deep dive, a discussion around what you want to achieve with your business in the future, and then apply some of the things that I think are going to come down the pipe, and work out how we can better prepare you for what's coming.
Excellent. I'll make sure that everyone can get hold of you every which way, and I'd also say, while you're listening, is to if you're a LinkedIn user, is to follow Daniel on LinkedIn, because you share a lot of knowledge bombs on there, and a lot of insight, but also a lot of just yourself, and you're a very personable human being, which I think is I didn't know existed on LinkedIn. I always thought it was just this horrible corporate place where people just talked about stocks and shares, but actually it's real people talking about the projects they're working on and the life that they're trying to build. So well worth a follow.
Oh, I appreciate that, Denise.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, one thing I'm exploring for 2025 is our safaris. So taking groups of interested businesses, curious consumers, out to some of these markets to experience for themselves firsthand what the world of retail and on-premise and on-trade is like in markets such as Los Angeles, maybe Denver, Colorado, maybe Portland in Oregon, maybe to a city in Germany. But yeah, I'm just putting it out there. If anyone is interested in accompanying me on a safari to one of these markets, cities, then please get in contact.
That sounds fascinating. So I'm envisaging a sort of a guided tour, but more on a conversational level, where you're introducing people to these spaces and the things that they can find in them and how they can use them. Is that about right?
Yeah, just opening people up to the possibility is what I would do. Is like, look, this is what's happening. This is where consumers are currently spending their money in this market when it's open. How does that plant a seed for what could happen with your business at home?
Fantastic. I think that sounds like a wonderful idea. I will make sure that people can get in touch with you to raise their hand if there's something that they would like to explore further.
Sounds
And
good, doesn't it? Sounds
that was
good.
my hand raised as well, because
You're in.
Fantastic. Before I let you go and I round up now, I'm going to put this question to you in two different ways. So at the end of every conversation, I have my now famous, possibly just in my own head, but still, barbecue question. Where I always ask you to extend your imagination to it being a nice, hot, sunny day, and you're off to a barbecue at a mate's house, and what low, no, or light drinks that you would bring with you to enjoy. Now, I'm going to put this in two ways for you. You can either go with just some functional drinks that you are your go-tos, or if you want to give us a few functional drinks that people could, take a look at, plus any other low or no drinks that you like. So the floor is yours. What's on your drinking list?
Well, do you know what? The thing that springs to mind straight away is a drink that probably no one's had before, which is this. It's Mother Root and sparkling dope. Now, you were talking about, that one of the judges of the non-alc, awards couldn't judge certain alc because they couldn't get them through customs. Now, I connected with a chap on LinkedIn, and he was able to get something through customs, so that arrived at my doorstep. So that's dope soda, and that's like a hard. Well, no, it's not hard. It's a seltzer, so it's just like pineapple flavored water. So that was a 50 ml shot of Mother Root and dope soda.
Okay.
So that would pineapple dope soda, which I bet I'm the first one to do that. So that would be my drink. And if that wasn't available, I'd have an Impossible Brew for sure.
Yeah, fantastic choices. I think that this is such an open area. We've barely scratched the surface, and I really could talk to you for hours about all of this. I've got so many more questions, but that would be rude to your time, so I won't do that. But I think that there's just so much we can explore here, and I'd encourage Low No Nation to do some of their own research, to go and have a look at these drinks. Some of these things, some of the ones that you can see behind me, you can go, they're in my local co-op, and go down and you can grab yourself a trip or a good raise. Others you might need to go to online low and no drink specialists. Others you might need to buy direct from their website. But do your research and check out the ingredients that are in there and what they can provide you with, because I think if we can find things that can add to our lives whilst not taking anything away, then that deserves some sort of exploration. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure talking to you, and I'd love to keep the possibility open that you'll come back and talk to me in a year or so, and we'll sort of see how things are moving on.
Yeah, I'd love to, Denise. Thank you very much.